When Daniel asked if he could touch it, I expected him to reach for the remote, maybe my hand, possibly even my face. I did not expect him to gesture toward the 8-inch scar running down my thigh, the one I'd spent 3 years hiding under jeans and maxi skirts, the one that marked the night I'd lost everything and gained a fear of storms I couldn't shake. But I'm getting ahead of myself. 3 hours earlier. The first crack of thunder sent my coffee mug crashing to the kitchen floor. I stood frozen, watching the dark liquid spread across the white tiles like spilled ink, my hands trembling so badly I had to grip the counter. Outside, the sky had turned that particular shade of greenish-black that meant serious weather, the kind that sent people to basements and made the local news extend their broadcasts. The kind that 3 years ago had flipped my car twice on Highway 49 and left me pinned in twisted metal for 4 hours. My phone buzzed with an emergency alert. Severe thunderstorm warning. Seek shelter immediately. Possible tornado activity. No, 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 I whispered, my chest tightening. I hadn't had a panic attack in 6 months. I wasn't going to start now. Another crack of thunder, closer this time. The lights flickered. I needed to get to the interior hallway. No windows, strongest part of the house. But my legs wouldn't move. The memory of rain hammering on metal, of lightning illuminating the inside of my wrecked car, of being unable to move, unable to breathe. The doorbell rang. I blinked, pulled partially from my spiral. Who would be at my door in the middle of a severe thunderstorm warning? Through the peephole, I saw Daniel Chen from 4B, his dark hair plastered to his forehead, water dripping from his jacket. He was holding something against his chest, wrapped in what looked like a towel. I yanked open the door. "Daniel, what are you?" "I'm so sorry to bother you," he said quickly, his words tumbling over each other in that way they did when he was nervous, which was almost always. In the year since he'd moved into the building, I'd had maybe a dozen conversations with him, each one featuring him looking at his shoes more than my face. "My apartment, there's water coming through the ceiling. Like a lot of water. The landlord isn't answering and I can't. I have machi." He shifted the towel slightly, and I caught sight of white fur and 2 dark eyes peering out. "Is that a rabbit?" Yes. Her name is Machi. She's very scared of storms and my apartment is flooding and I didn't know where else." He stopped, rain streaming down his face, looking absolutely miserable. "I'm sorry. This was stupid. I'll figure something out." "Get in here," I said, stepping back. His eyes widened. "Really?" "Before you both drown, come on." He slipped inside, dripping water all over my entryway. I grabbed towels from the hallway closet while he stood there awkwardly, still cradling his rabbit like it was made of glass. "Bathrooms to the right if you want to dry off," I said. "I'll get something for Machi." "Machi," he confirmed. "She needs somewhere enclosed. She gets really anxious." "Join the club," I muttered, then caught myself. "The guest bathroom. Put her in there for now. There are clean towels under the sink she can sit on." While Daniel disappeared into the bathroom, I forced myself to focus on being a good host rather than the storm raging outside. I could do this. I could be normal. I wiped up the spilled coffee, put on the kettle for tea, tried not to flinch every time thunder rolled overhead. Daniel emerged a few minutes later, marginally drier, his black hair sticking up in odd directions from the towel. He'd taken off his jacket to reveal a faded graphic t-shirt for some indie video game I didn't recognize. Without the bulky jacket, I could see he was lean but broader in the shoulders than I'd expected. "Thank you," he said, still not quite meeting my eyes. "Really, I know we don't really know each other and showing up like this is probably weird, but—" "It's fine," I said, surprised to find I meant it. Having him here was actually helping, giving me something to focus on besides the storm. "Tea." "Oh, sure, thank you." We stood in awkward silence while the kettle heated. Daniel kept glancing toward the bathroom where Machi was, then at the window, then at his feet. I recognized a fellow anxiety sufferer when I saw one. "She'll be okay," I offered. "Rabbits are tougher than they look." "I know, I've had her since I was 23, she's like, it's stupid." "It's not stupid." He looked up at me then, really looked at me, and I was struck by how dark his eyes were. In the year of occasional hallway encounters and polite nods, I'd never noticed that before. The lights flickered again, stayed off for a heartbeat, then came back on. We should probably, I gestured vaguely toward the living room, away from the kitchen and the windows. Right, yeah. I poured the tea into mugs and led him to the living room, which faced the interior courtyard rather than the street. Fewer windows, which helped my nerves even if I wouldn't admit it. The TV was still on from earlier, muted on some home renovation show. We sat on opposite ends of my couch, the distance between us somehow more noticeable than if we'd been in separate rooms. Do you want to? I gestured at the TV with the remote. Change it to something else, or turn it off, or... Whatever you want is fine. Another boom of thunder, loud enough to rattle the windows. I gripped my tea mug harder, willing my hands not to shake. Are you okay? Daniel's voice was soft. Fine. You don't look fine, you look kind of. Is it the storm? I should have deflected, should have made a joke or changed the subject. Instead, I found myself saying, I was in a car accident 3 years ago, during a storm like this. I'm not great with them now. Oh, he was quiet for a moment. That must have been really scary. The understatement should have been funny, but something about the genuine concern in his voice made my throat tight. Yeah. Do you want me to, I don't know, talk, to distract you? I'm not very good at talking, but I could try. Despite everything, I almost smiled. You're doing fine. I'm really not. I never know what to say to people, especially... He stopped, color rising in his cheeks. Especially what? Nothing, never mind. We fell back into silence, but it felt different now. Less awkward, more like two people in a lifeboat together, waiting out the storm. I turned up the TV volume slightly, found a nature documentary about octopuses. Safe, calming, except the lightning kept flashing outside, and every crack of thunder made my shoulders tense. Can I tell you something? Daniel said suddenly. Sure. I've wanted to talk to you since I moved in. Like, really talk to you, not just hi in the hallway. He was looking at his tea mug, his fingers tracing the rim. But I'm terrible at talking to people I find interesting. And you always seemed so put together, so confident. I figured you'd think I was boring. I blinked. You think I'm confident? Are you not? Daniel, I haven't been confident in 3 years. I can barely leave my apartment when it's cloudy because I'm afraid it might rain. I hide from storms like a child. I'm a mess. He finally looked at me again. You don't seem like a mess. Neither do you. I am, though. I'm anxious all the time. I practice conversations in my head for days before I have them. I brought my rabbit to my neighbor's apartment because I was too scared to stay in mine alone during a storm. He laughed, but it sounded painful. We're quite a pair. Another flash of lightning, bright enough to illuminate the whole room. I flinched hard, tea sloshing in my mug. Hey, Daniel said, and suddenly he was closer, not touching me but near enough that I could feel the warmth of him. What helps when you're scared? I don't know, nothing really. What about focusing on something else? Like completely focusing? I've tried that, doesn't usually work. Can I try something? I nodded, not trusting my voice. Tell me 5 things you can see right now. What? 5 things, anything, just describe them to me. I understood then, grounding technique. The TV, your mug, that crack in the ceiling I keep meaning to fix, the photo on the wall of my parents, your shirt. Good, 4 things you can touch. I reached out hesitantly, touched the couch cushion. This, the mug, it's warm, my jeans. I paused. Your hand. I hadn't meant to reach for it, but suddenly my fingers were brushing his, and he didn't pull away. Yeah, he said softly. That works, 3 things you can hear. The TV, the rain. I paused, listening. Your breathing. 2 things you can smell. Tea and, I don't know, something citrus. Your shampoo, maybe. 1 thing you can taste. The tea, chamomile. I realized my shoulders had dropped, My breathing had evened out. The storm was still raging outside, but the panic had receded to something manageable. "Better?" Daniel asked. "Yeah, thank you." I was still holding his hand. I should probably let go. I didn't want to let go. My therapist taught me that. I have panic attacks sometimes. Usually in crowds, but storms can trigger them too. "We really are quite a pair," I said, echoing his earlier words. He smiled, and it transformed his whole face. I'd seen him smile politely in the hallway before, but this was different. This reached his eyes. We stayed like that for a while, hands loosely intertwined, watching octopuses change colors on the screen. The storm continued outside, but inside felt safe. Warm. Like maybe neither of us was as alone as we'd thought. 2 hours later. The documentary had ended and rolled into another one about deep-sea creatures. At some point, Daniel had shifted closer, until we were sitting in the middle of the couch rather than on opposite ends. At some point, I'd pulled a blanket over both our laps. At some point, being afraid had become less important than this, whatever this was. "Can I ask you something?" Daniel said during a lull. "Sure." "The accident, were you hurt badly?" I tensed slightly, and he must have felt it because he quickly added, "You don't have to answer. I'm sorry, that was too personal." "No, it's okay." I took a breath. "Yeah, pretty badly. Broken ribs, collapsed lung, severe lacerations. The worst was my right leg. They had to do 2 surgeries, lots of pins and screws. Left a pretty impressive scar." "Is that why you always wear long pants, even in summer?" I looked at him sharply. "You notice that?" Color crept up his neck. "I notice a lot of things about you." My heart did something complicated in my chest. "Yeah, that's why. It's ugly. I hate looking at it." "Can I see it?" The question hung in the air between us. Outside, the storm had settled into steady rain, the thunder distant now. "Why?" "I don't know, because you're ashamed of it, and I don't think you should be." "You don't even know what it looks like." "Doesn't matter. It's part of what happened to you, part of how you survived." I sat very still, considering. This man I barely knew was asking to see something I'd hidden from everyone, from my own mother when she'd visited last summer, making excuses about being cold even in the heat. "Okay," I heard myself say. I stood up, and Daniel immediately looked away, giving me privacy I hadn't asked for. Something about that courtesy made my decision feel more right. I unzipped my jeans, slid them down to mid-thigh. The scar ran from just above my knee to mid-thigh, raised and pink in places, silvery in others. A roadmap of trauma traced in flesh. "You can look," I said softly. He turned and his eyes went to the scar. He didn't flinch, didn't grimace, he just looked. "Can I touch it?" he asked. And there it was, the question that had started everything, the moment that would shift something between us in ways I couldn't yet understand. "Yes." He moved closer, kneeling on the floor in front of where I stood. His hand hovered over my thigh, not quite touching. "Tell me if you want me to stop." Then his fingers touched down, gentle as anything, tracing the longest line of scar tissue. His touch was warm, reverent almost. He followed the path of it, the texture changing under his fingertips. "Does it hurt?" he whispered. "Not anymore. Sometimes when it's cold." "It's not ugly," he said, still touching, still tracing. "It's proof you survived, it's proof you're strong." My breath caught. His hand had stilled, resting against my thigh, and when I looked down at him, I saw something in his expression that made me feel suddenly, intensely shy. Me, who just let him see and touch my deepest insecurity. "Daniel, I've thought about you every day since I moved in," he said, his voice low. "Every single day. I'd plan my trips to the mailbox around when I thought I might see you. I'd rehearse what I'd say, then completely freeze when you actually appeared. I thought you were so far out of my league I didn't even try." "I'm not out of anyone's league. I'm a mess, remember." "You're beautiful," he said simply, "and brave, and kind. You let a stranger and his rabbit into your home during a storm." "You're not a stranger, not anymore." His hand was still on my thigh, warm and solid and real. We were close enough that I could count his eyelashes, see the barely there freckle near his temple. "Can I?" he started, then seemed to lose his nerve. "Can you what?" "Can I kiss you?" The question was so earnest, so vulnerable, that something in my chest cracked open. "Yes." He stood slowly, his hand sliding from my thigh to my hip. And then his other hand was cupping my face, and his lips were on mine, and oh, this was nothing like I'd expected. There was nothing uncertain about the way he kissed me. It was sure and deep and searching, like he'd been thinking about exactly how he wanted to kiss me for a very long time. I made a sound against his mouth, my hands fisting in his shirt, pulling him closer. His arm wrapped around my waist, holding me against him, and I could feel his heart hammering against my chest. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathing hard. I couldn't finish the sentence. "Yeah," he agreed. "I should probably put my pants back on." Probably, but neither of us moved. Then we were kissing again, and this time when his hands slid down to my hips, pulling me flush against him, I could feel exactly how much he wanted this. Wanted me. The knowledge sent heat pooling low in my stomach. We stumbled backward until my back hit the wall beside the TV, and Daniel's mouth moved from my lips to my jaw to my neck, finding the spot just below my ear that made me gasp. "Is this okay?" he murmured against my skin. "Very okay." His hands slid under my shirt, fingers splaying across my ribs, and I arched into the touch. Outside, the rain continued its steady percussion, but all I could focus on was Daniel. His mouth, his hands, the solid warmth of his body pressed against mine. "We should probably," I started, but he kissed me again and I lost my train of thought entirely. "Should probably what?" he asked when we came up for air. "I don't know, something responsible. Slow down." "Do you want to slow down?" This was fast, reckless even. We barely knew each other. But somehow, standing here with my jeans still around my thighs and Daniel's hands on my bare skin, I'd never felt safer. "No," I admitted. He smiled against my mouth. "Good." Later. We did eventually make it back to the couch, though my jeans didn't make it back on for a while. We lay tangled together under the blanket, my head on his chest, his fingers drawing lazy patterns on my shoulder. On the TV, deep-sea anglerfish drifted through darkness, their bioluminescent lures glowing. "I should check on Machi," Daniel murmured, but he didn't move. In a minute. MMM. The storm had passed, leaving only gentle rain pattering against the windows. Somewhere in the past few hours, my fear had dissolved, replaced by something warm and unexpected. "This is crazy, right?" I said. "We don't even know each other." "I know you take your coffee black. You leave for work at exactly 7:42 every morning. You always hold the elevator for people even when you're running late. You sing in your apartment sometimes. I can hear it through the walls, usually something from the 90s. I lifted my head to look at him. "That's borderline creepy." "I know, sorry, I pay attention." "What else do you know?" "You're scared of storms, but you face them anyway. You open your door to anxious neighbors with rabbits. You hate your scar, but you let me see it anyway." His hand came up to cup my face. "You're so much braver than you think you are." My eyes burned. I'm not brave. I'm terrified most of the time. Brave isn't not being scared. It's being scared and doing it anyway. I kissed him again, soft and sweet this time, a thank you without words. "Stay," I said when we parted. "Tonight, I mean, you and Machi, your apartment's probably still a mess." "Are you sure?" "Very sure." He smiled, and it was like watching the sun come out. "Okay." We stayed on the couch until the documentary ended, until the late-night talk shows started, until we were both half asleep in each other's arms. Eventually, we moved to my bedroom, and Daniel checked on Machi, who was fine, if judgmental, and we lay in my bed together like we'd done this 1,000 times before. "Hey," I whispered into the darkness. "Yeah. Thank you for the grounding technique, for everything. Thank you for opening the door." anytime you need shelter from a storm. Literal or metaphorical? Both. I felt him smile against my shoulder. Same to you. And as I drifted off to sleep, the sound of rain on the windows no longer felt threatening. It felt almost like a lullaby, like the storm had brought me exactly what I needed even as I'd feared it. Sometimes the things we're most afraid of lead us to exactly where we're meant to be. Epilogue. The landlord fixed Daniel's ceiling the next day, but he didn't move his things back for 3 more days. Machi seemed to approve of my apartment, or at least approve of the fact that I'd bought her organic lettuce from the farmer's market. A week later, Daniel and I were officially dating. A month after that, we'd stopped pretending he lived in 4B at all. 6 months later, when another storm rolled through, we faced it together on that same couch, under that same blanket, and I didn't feel afraid at all. The scar on my thigh faded from pink to silver, and I stopped wearing jeans in summer. Daniel traced it sometimes, absently, like it was just another part of me, which I guess it was. A part of me that had survived. A part of me that had led me to open my door on the worst night, which turned out to be the best decision I'd ever made. We kept the rabbit, obviously. And every time it rained, I remembered that storms could bring shelter as easily as they brought fear. Sometimes what seems like chaos is actually fate, working in ways we can't yet understand. All because a shy neighbor asked, "Can I touch it?" And I'd been brave enough to say yes.